September 4th, 2011. I'm Doris Montag, and we're reporting from the Cedar Valley Engine Show near Charles City, Iowa in Floyd County. We're going to be interviewing these two gentlemen, talking about the Norburg engine that they have here at the show. And we are talking about how we came to have the engine here at the show. So, would you introduce yourself?
I'm Jason Schillen. I'm one of the crew that went out and helped take the engine apart and put it back together. And this is on my uncle's farm, and he's over here next to me.
I'm Harold Swartzrock, and I helped tear it down and managed tearing it down and loading it and putting it back together.
So tell us how you found out about this engine.
How I probably wouldn't have run across it, but I went to a sale down by Iowa City to buy a UDLX Minneapolis Moline tractor. And my wife says, don't come home without it. And we thought probably $8,000, and I quit at $12,000, and she let me come back home. Anyway, I was walking away from the sale, and this gentleman walked up to me, which I didn't know. I guess he knew me, and Schweitzer from in that area, and he's a good, big Ellis Chalmers collector of books, and he liked to get experimental tractors out of Ellis Chalmers, which he did. And he says, there's a big Corliss air compressor in Ellis Chalmers in LaPorte, Indiana. And he says, your club ought to have that. And oh man, that sounded far-fetched, and I didn't pay a lot of attention. He says, give me a call. And I did make a call to him, and we finally made him and me went into where this engine was. We had Christmas at our family house, and then I never went to bed and met him in Iowa City about 12 o'clock after Christmas, and we drove straight through to
Drove straight out to LaPorte.
LaPorte, Indiana, and the Alice people was there. They took us in and showed us this engine, and I took a few pictures and what they had to have if they was going to donate it to our Cedar Valley Engine Club. And the club had to send a paper in that they would accept it, and which they did, and they accepted us, Cedar Valley Engine Club, could have it by taking it out of there.
So there was no cost to it as long as you
no
came
cost
and removed it.
charge, just remove it.
And was the plant there closing down?
It was closed pretty well down.
So tell us a little bit about that plant before we go on.
It made Rumley tractors for years, the Rumley tractor manufacturing, and then they had wood floors in there so they could drive their Rumley tractors on the 2x4s or 2x6s standing on the end creosoted. The whole floors were that way. And they built tractors up till the 30s, and then Ellis Chalmers bought them out. And in this plant, Ellis Chalmers 60 pull type combine was built. And I guess they built about one a minute back in the days when they were real popular.
And you had said that this engine controlled 6 buildings, did you say?
6, 7 buildings, each one about a mile long, and it supplied the heat in the wintertime, and then it did the air for everything in the plant. In that building, the air was piped to the building.
All the air tools. And in the wintertime, it was real efficient because they used the exhaust heat to heat all the buildings, and which they didn't have to. They made the air for their workers, and then the exhaust heat hit the building that they worked in.
And if you hadn't come and gotten it, were they going to just plow it under?
It probably would have been scrapped if some other club wouldn't have took it. That's something we don't know, but one way or the other, it was going to be removed.
And the man who approached you at the auction, was he from Alice Chalmers?
No, he was an Alice Chalmers collector.
Okay.
He collected, and he made a lot of trips in there and knew the personnel and these people that worked there. And the plant was being closed down, and very few workers left anymore. And he knew all of them by their first name. And he was after literature, experimental tractors, which he got out of there, talked them out of it, and he was after collectible items. He did not want the steam air compressor. And
so was it hard to talk the engine club into going and doing it? Were they pessimistic about being able to pull
I
that
brought
off?
it up to the club, and then they had to make up a paper saying that they would accept it under them conditions. And of course, the board accepted it, and then it was the task of getting it out of there. And we went in with about 6 people, and when they first looked at it, they said, "Oh, we better go home." And I had to think of something real fast, so I says, "Well, we got to get enough stuff off." We had trailers along. We got to get enough stuff off to pay for our gas getting here.
Yeah. You couldn't come home skunked.
We better start taking things off and see how it goes. And I got them interested, and oh, we can't get that bolt or that bolt. And I had to manage and the trucks this was on a Monday, well, not on the Monday, on the first crew.
The second time.
We got a lot of stuff off, and we put it on the trailer and brought it home that time. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, we waited, and we got about a crew of 12. And we went in on a Sunday, left, and we got there, was ready for Monday morning. And the crew went to work, and we had 2 trucks, semi-flatbeds, spoken for, and they wasn't supposed to come to Wednesday. But these truckers didn't have anything to do, so they come about Monday, maybe after dinner. Well, I had to make up my mind, so what I done is split the crew up, and half of them started loading, and the other half finished tearing down. And before I went back out there, I had to figure out how I was going to handle all of this. We got a lot of heavy stuff. Some stuff could be broken. So I says, we need some lumber. And they had a pile of poles here in the yard. The light company, the ice storm tore down a bunch of light poles, terrible bunch of them. So we had them saw boards and 12 by 12 pieces out that I thought I needed. Then I took a cable and a snatch block, they call it, so they could hook it to something and pull this heavy stuff out. And I took that stuff all along on the last trip. And then the crew started, we had a plate 4 foot by 8 foot, half-inch thick.
This piece of something on that plate.
And we would set this stuff on the plate and pull it, I don't know how many.
From here to here is 50 feet. From where the engine set to that dock is 50 feet. We slid it that far with that plate. We pulled everything out.
We pulled it on the plate. We did have
power, or did you have a vehicle? Okay.
We had a crane to lift the stuff over on the plate.
Okay.
Then to get it out of the building, there was no way to get it out other than slide it on a plate. And we used a cable and a snatch block, and we pulled it out. Then we had to turn it to go up on the truck because the truck couldn't get it straight in from the end. And
then did the crane have to lift it up again?
no, we had to jack it up and take the plate off and under there and take it back for another piece. And we had to do that manually. The crane only set it from where it was setting, would move over to the side here and put it on the plate. And
do you have any idea how many pounds of steel you have here?
40 ton.
40 ton.
they semis thought they were overloaded, and we hauled quite a lot of stuff with our pickups and trailers.
So how many semi flatbeds?
Two semi flatbeds. And we went Monday noon, the trucks come, and I thought they were a little early because they wasn't supposed to come till Wednesday, but they didn't have anything to do, so I split the crew up and had them start loading. We had 2 trucks there, and they had to be loaded, so I split the crew up. The rest finished tearing down, and the rest started loading. And we really had it loaded by Wednesday night. But through the loading, the plate was pulling a little hard, so they put boiler compound down they had there in the plant for their big boilers. Made it real slippery on the floor of the truck. In the meantime, and I wasn't in on that, but they come back here pretty soon and said, hey, the flywheel fell off the truck. It was so slippery.
Really, it did?
And it fell off the side of the pluck. Nobody got hurt, and we had to think of ways to try to get half that flywheel back up on the truck. And we had it, and then they come out and said, we can't leave that hole there. You got to buy fill dirt and fill it up. And I says, well, we got a bunch of lumber along, which we sewed them light poles up. And they said, well, that's a fire hazard. And I says, well, your floor in your big buildings there is all wood. I don't know why that would be more of a fire hazard than
your own building.
Oh, never thought of that. And they let us go ahead and put the boards on. I was back there me and my wife a year or so afterwards, and they was building a mall there, and the fence wasn't very good, so we sneaked through the fence, and the lumber was all gone and the hole was still there.
So can you name the other gentleman who went with you? You know, we saw some of them here in this picture.
David?
This guy, like I say, is Kenny Griffin, brother Gordy Griffin. That's Harold, Bob Wilsey, Lyle Griffin. Can't that guy's name. He was there. Can't say what his name is, but he was there on the second go around. First one, everybody but him went to first one, and as Schweitzer, it was him, but everybody but him was on the first one.
Okay.
But we had about 12 at
The second time we went out, then they had almost a dozen of us the second time.
Yeah, but I don't know. Well, that one guy.
The Shorty Cox was him.
Yeah, Shorty Cox.
Then we had Bill Neal,
Bill
Fred
Neal.
Pito, Eldon Hungerford, that guy that used to come with Eldon, that Smith from Osage, was him. Let's see, I had it all wrote down the other night. That was Bill Neal, Fred Pito, Shorty Cox, Eldon Hungerford, that Smith, and there was one more. About 6 of us, there's about a dozen of us all together.
Yeah.
Now, when you were, it sounds like you were the foreman for the project. No, there are so many parts and pieces on here. How did you try to organize the parts so you would know how to put it back together?
The linkages, I brought steel stamps along, and I steel stamped them, and I took a picture of them here, and I had them marked. I marked P2 steel stamp, left side or whatever, right side, and I marked all the linkages so I know how we put them back together. But we had somewhere down the line, and I don't know who it was, somebody come out here and put all the linkages on, and they didn't have my blueprints. And
They did it without them?
They done it without them, but I don't know if they ever got put on right or not. Anyway, they work.
And then you didn't worry about organizing them in the transport. You just got it all back here, and then the stamps were going to be the way you would start reconstructing.
I had a lot of advice, and we had blueprints the company gave us, and I couldn't read the blueprints, so I just went ahead with my own ruler and ideas, and me and Ray Stainer, Shorty,
Dick Nelson.
Well, Dick Nelson might have helped a little, and
it was mainly you and Wilsey and Stainer and
Shorty.
you and Shorty and Stainer.
Yeah.
And
And I went ahead and made the decisions about putting the cement in, and we kind of worked together, and I had to make the decisions. Stainer wouldn't make them.
So did you start building it in here before there was the exterior building?
No building over it. We didn't put the building on until the flywheel was in, and the big red air dryer up there. And me and them worked 6 weeks to put it up on its base. We had no boiler yet. And the first year we painted it. The second year I don't think it run. Third year we run it. We got a boiler and got that in and got it all hooked up. And that's
a picture of the crew that was putting it back together.
Yep.
There's Harold, Shorty, Stainer.
Mm-hmm.
And
You got it together in the same year that you brought it home?
No.
No.
Because you can't.
We started, yeah, I got it together. the first year, I says, let's put it together right away before it gets rusty. And we went to work on it right away. And I put it together that summer. Then they built.
Work with a backhoe. See, he's digging the hole. He's digging it with a backhoe, and they're digging out the footings. And they're digging for the cement. Harold did all that work with a backhoe. He dug all that out.
And I done it just by using a ruler. I don't know how, but I did it, got it done. I don't think I could do it again.
So I think I heard you say earlier they only made 3 of them,
Right.
and this is the only one that remains.
Right. The other 2 got scrapped out. They never really made it into production.
Oh.
This is the only one that actually made it in running production.
And that you said was in 1906. So then after you got the flywheel go, which is the big piece to get in here,
Yes.
and this big tower here. Tell us about this setup with this steam.
Then they started
coming
putting
in.
they put the building over the top. Then we bought a boiler out of the, what?
You come out of the creamery in Racine, Minnesota.
Racine, Minnesota. And we bought the boiler and we installed the boiler and put the steam pipe in. And then we didn't have 3-phase here, so we had to put a phaser in for like twisty for 3-phase. And we're not really light twitching, so we had to find some light twitching knowledge to help us get that done. When we went to start the engine, I don't know if this is the time to bring that up or not.
Sure.
When we went to start the engine, I didn't want to start it on steam. I was a little reluctant. Maybe our work wasn't as good as it could be. So I called this boy down the road with a sandblaster, come over with his air compressor. And we hooked an air compressor on, and I figured we had the boiler, so we used the boiler for volume, and we built it about 80 pounds of air in the boiler, and then we proceeded to start. And I turned the wheel, and the thing jumped. And finally, I didn't know which way it was supposed to run. I still don't. But anyway, it started. It went the other way, and it started running on compressed air. And I started it on compressed air because I was kind of afraid starting it on steam, maybe something might go wrong. It'd be hot. And we had one guy here that come out here, and he seen me trying to start this on a 1/2-inch air hose. And he went to town and, well, told Harry Brenton that I was out here trying to start that engine on a 1/2-inch hose. Maybe it was a little off of my rocker. And so when it started and it was running on compressed air, this Harry Brenton said he probably wouldn't live long enough to see it run. So we went to the phone and called him and had him come out and see it running on compressed air. And it run fine. It had a little tick. One piston rod hit the head, which didn't hurt anything, but just you could hear the tick, which we didn't take much time to correct that. But other than that, it took right off after I put it together.
So now I want to go back to the removal, and I wanted to ask if the Alice Chalmers people gave you any assistance.
We was in trouble pulling this stuff out of there on this steel plate, with a cable. So we asked them, and they helped us out by letting us use an Allis-Chalmers tractor to pull it out of the building. That was one of their big helps. They used a tractor, or we wouldn't have been able to pull it out.
And then you contracted the crane to come for lifting, or was that theirs?
No, there was no crane. There was a crane in the over top of the engine.
The hoist then you used to move the
They
piece to
supplied
metal.
the electrical power to run the crane. And we could use the crane anytime to lift this stuff over and put it onto the plate. And that was a big help. And then the next thing we had when we was tearing down, taking the cylinder head off and big burr nut on the end, we had no wrench. And there was a guy at the plant, and he made this wrench up for us.
He made it for you?
Yes. And that was a big help. He welded that together in that tube so we could take the nut off the end of that cylinder. And he was a kind of a machinist. And without that, I don't know how we'd have got that nut off in there, because you couldn't run downtown and buy a socket to fit that. And that's probably about 3 things that Alice really helped us get it out of the plant.
They turned the electricity on.
Major things that we had to rely upon Allis-Chalmers to.
I think it's also important that we record that you did have standardized nuts and bolts at that
Yes.
time when this was made, because I know with the Watts engine, that was a problem that they had to overcome as well.
That was a problem.
And then, like another unique story, every morning when we got there, we would have to go see the security guard. And he was kind of like Barney Fife from the Andy Griffin show. And we got to visit with him, and he got to know us by name. And we'd show up every morning, and we'd have to sign in and make sure that we was accounted for when we got there. And he was just a character. Every morning, you know, we'd talk with him and we had a good time with him.
One thing the club done, and I had to take care of that too, we paid for all the help, motels and eats. And I had to take care of paying for all of that. See that the motels got their money, and eating, feed the crew, and the club fed and boarded, room and board.
And then I thought I heard you say earlier you could only get in to work on this during the day shift,
Yes.
I guess.
Yes,
And that was just because of security for them?
yes. And I don't know why, because they didn't have much of nothing there anymore.
But they had operated as a 24-hour
Yeah, right.
activity, and so this engine ran all of the time.
Yep. Yep. They probably employed somewheres over 2,500 to 3,000 people there at one time
Easy.
in that factory. In the big heydays when things was selling real big.
So you said about 84 you learned about it, 85 you brought it back here,
Mm-hmm.
so it had closed down by the time you heard about it in
Yep.
84.
And then another unique story about it, this thing with a whistle on it, and it would be a symbol to the city. When this thing would start the morning shift, the whistle would go off, and everybody knew the shift was starting. They knew the factory was running. Same thing at dinner time. They knew it would be noon, and when the final shift would leave, they would blow the whistle, and everybody knew the plant was closing. So they said when this thing ended, they said the last day, it was a real memorial to it. They let this thing blow, and they knew it would be the last time to hear it. And they said the town just stopped to hear this whistle. It was the last time it was going to be, running. And they said that whistle was clockwork. You could set your clock by it. You knew when everything was running, because the factory was running.
I should have brought the whistle out here. I have one whistle that belongs to the club, and it stands about this high, 3 foot. And I have it down to my store and on a stand, but it belongs to the club. I store it, but I don't claim it myself. It belongs to the club.
So you told a story earlier of the man who came last year or a few years ago who knew what this was and valued what this was, because there's not a lot of people who understand, the history of some of these machines. And the Cedar Valley Engine Club has 2 very unique. This Norburg, and then a Watts engine, which
Yes.
we'll cover at another time. So do you have any other stories about it, either about visitors that have come to see it, or?
Well, when we was tearing it down, I had somebody come through there and he says, I want to buy the flywheel. I don't know how he got in there, but I don't know if you remember that or not, but he wanted to buy the flywheel for an ornament.
He lived just outside of the town, and he wanted a piece of it for memorabilia.
He wanted a souvenir.
Souvenir.
I don't think so.
I didn't think so.
And then another unique story was we had salvage crew was working right next to us. They was tearing the factory down,
Okay.
and every morning the salvage crew would watch us just like hawks. They would come over and they would make sure that we was taking stuff apart, because they was just licking their chops. If we quit, they was going to come in and finish the job. They was going to cut this thing up. So that kind of just kept us going. That, well, let's get this out. And so we had to work with that salvage crew.
They wanted scrap iron.
Yeah.
I think Alice Chalmers, really, the people that was there, I don't think they ever thought we'd ever get it out of there.
Exactly.
I don't think they're
Yeah.
in
They
their,
underestimated you.
yeah, and it was quite a bit to manage. And when I got them all interested, they was good workers, and things went real good.
And another funny story, when we got there, we didn't look professional. We just farm people.
Yeah.
And we come in and we're carrying our wrenches in 5-gallon pails. We're carrying it in, and anything we need, we're in the pail. So we just go over to the pail and you get your wrench or a pipe wrench, and we're just carrying it in pails. And it was a shock to see it, here farm people, and we just had.
Well,
Regular things.
after the first trip in, and then I had to make in my own mind what I needed on the last trip to complete the operation. And that was these light poles. I said, I need lumber, I need this 12 by 12s, if you can saw them that big, to break my crankshaft. I need ready bolts so I can bolt that and make a crate together, chainsaw, so we can cut this wood and so forth. And then we need a cable, and we got to have a snatch block, and I didn't think about a tractor to pull it out of there.
What about the metal piece that you slid that on? Did you take that?
No,
No,
we left it. Well, we borrowed it
we
from,
took it back. What we did, there was AC had their own foundry, but there was another one right next door that's also supplied parts to Alice Chalmers. So we walked over there and we seen this steel. We borrowed it. We seen it laying there.
borrowed it.
And we picked it up and we brought it over to where we needed it. And then when we got done, we took it back.
Yeah.
We left
That was
it there.
fortunate.
Well,
Yeah.
we had to do something to find to pull these pieces out.
In the process, when we first got there, club didn't have a lot of money, and somebody says, well, they went uptown to buy a socket. Well, how much did they spend? $75 for that socket. I says, my goodness, we got to take that socket back. The club can't stand that kind of money, which they did. And
They did take it back.
I says, we'll get them birds off somewhere without that socket.
I bought it at they had an Ace True Value hardware store, and I went up there and we found it. It was a pretty good sized socket, but it was $75. Well, I brought it back, and Harold said, no, he said, we can't afford that. Take it back.
We got wrenches, sometime we get it off.
And then that guy showed up that made this.
Yeah, we run across a problem, and I don't know how we got a hold of this guy, but he come
showed
over
up
there,
one day.
he measured that up, we kept working, he come along and brought it back, put a wrench on it, turned that burr off, and the way back in business.
What he was done in a machine shop, and where the tractor was, I'd walked over there and seen him, because we had to put the tractor away every night, and we stored it in his shop, and that's where he worked. So then he knew he was doing something, and he walked over there, and that's how he showed up, because he'd seen it. He knew where we was, and I told him, you know, we was using the tractor, and he knew where we was.
He probably thought, you know, you couldn't pull it off. These farmers from Iowa came out here to undo all this, and probably never thought it would go back together again.
Well, it's a good thing we put it together as soon as we got here, because a lot of clubs get something and it sits outside for 2 or 3 years, and then you got Ross to deal with and a lot more work. So that's why I made a decision to do it right away. We took it out in the spring and I put it together in the fall.
In the fall.
But by fall I had it together. Yeah.
Well, it's an important piece of work that you did.
It was interesting.
We had a good time, I know that, learned an awful lot. We had a bunch of dedicated people that have passed on, and they deserve some credit. They done a lot of hard work.
Yes, all the crew we had, and they were just common people, and they all wouldn't have been possible without the help that we had.
Dedicated crew.
And if we missed any names or anybody in the transaction of moving this, they all was helpful and thankful to have the good people to work, and they was good to work with. Very good.
Well, I think the Engine Club is just really, really fortunate to be able to have something that's so unique and
Yeah.
so unusual out on the countryside.
Yep, just a little old farmer club.
Club. Well, I know a couple years ago there was someone from Washington State who had heard about the 2 engines and had come
Yeah.
specifically to see the engines. So they're coming from far and wide now.
Yep.
I came through here this morning, and his daughter is just starting to learn about James Watt.
Okay.
Never had seen it, you know, nothing but in person. And I said, you can forget about your book. You're seeing it right here. I said, this is what started it. It's right here. Well, they'd never even heard of it. They're just starting to learn about James Watt. So this is right here is history. You need to read this and take pictures.